Hey everyone, I'm super excited about today's episode because I got a chance to sit down and talk with Mark Huber, head of brand and product marketing over at Metadata. We covered a lot in this one, from why they started out as an ABM platform, but they really don't see themselves that way anymore, and how Metadata helps to run campaign experimentation at scale, and why they're looking to automate a lot of those mundane tasks that marketers deal with day in and day out. There's a lot of good stuff in this episode, so let's get into it.
So, Mark, it's great to have you on the show, man.
I'm pumped. I see your face all the time in my LinkedIn feed. So I know we've talked a couple times before, but this will be fun.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's not why I said it.
Well, so I this is fun because obviously, I run demand for our company, which is SharpSpring, which is a constant contact product, and then you obviously that's what you guys do. I wanted to just maybe jump in really quickly and just say, okay, for the audience that might not know what you guys do, what kind of problem you actually solve, like what is metadata and how do people wrap their minds around it? Like what do they think when they think metadata?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because it's something that we are trying to do a better job of right now, and we're working on our strategic narrative. So we, as a company, have been around since 2016, and Gil Alouche, our CEO, did not hire a full-time marketer until Jason Wittett, my boss, joined in, I think, like right when the pandemic hit. So I tell you this because he did not invest in marketing at all for 4 or 5 years, and kind of rode the coattails of the ABM platforms who had defined the category and spent all of this money marketing the category. So the market sees us as an ABM platform. We do not consider ourselves an ABM platform. What we do is we automate all of the repetitive and time-consuming parts of running paid campaigns, like audience building, recreating your audiences in each channel, recreating campaigns in each channel, ongoing optimizations, all that stuff. So it's almost like you have a automated campaign manager on your team, and it's doing all the work for you so you can focus on the big things.
So I think what's interesting about that is you said metadata started in 2016. Then Jason was hired when?
I think it was like March of 2020 when that little thing started in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you came in 6 or 8 months ago. Is that about right?
I started August of 2020.
Okay. Sorry, I lost that part of it. We'll cut that out. But you said you started when?
August of 2020.
August of 2020. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what's fascinating about that is, I've been doing this a fair amount of time, but I had not known what metadata was until I would say summer of 21-ish, something like that, which is interesting, right?
Yep.
And so like there's all sorts of reasons why that's interesting. We could unpack that. I think maybe a different episode, but I think that's
yeah.
You guys have done some really neat stuff, and I want to kind of talk just from as a marketer to a marketer. One of the things that I really love is that you guys don't spend a lot of time like trying to get it perfect. You do a fantastic job of like Pareto rule, like just crank it out, like get the base, built and very quick iterations, get feedback and then keep iterating. I mean, you've launched Demand You, you've like done these other things, like the content you guys are producing is cool. And it's recognizable, right? And so I'm just kind of curious, like, well, first of all, let's talk about the size of the team. Like I wanted to do that really quickly. And then I wanted to talk about like kind of like your philosophy is for that, because there's a lot of people on this on this podcast right now that are thinking, I can't get enough done. I don't have enough people. I don't have enough budget. Like they're struggling with that sort of mentality. And I want to like free people up from that a little bit.
Yep. So before I answer any of that, I just want to say thank you for noticing that, because that's what keeps us going and I think what motivates us. So I appreciate you saying all those things. Yeah. So we'll answer the team question first, because I think that's the easier one. So when I joined in August of 2020, for basically a full year, we were a team of 2. And we had a couple different agency partners that we were working with. We still work with today. So one is a creative agency called Algert, who does all of our, let's say, creative direction, design, and development, anything digital. So we do not have that in-house. And then the other agency partner that we have is York IE. They were one of our investors in our A round. And we did work with some freelancers, I think, kind of along the way, but we were able to get as much as we could get done with 2 marketers and a few partners up until August of last year. So that's when we hired a senior content marketing manager, and we were a team of 3 up until this last month. And then my head is still reeling. We grew from 3 to 7 full-time marketers in a month. And if it sounds like it would be hard to onboard 4 people in a month as a 3-person team, it's because it is.
Yeah. My experience has been whenever I have built teams, the smaller the team, the bigger the hire is, right? When it's smaller, right? It's one thing if the team is 30 and an extra person doesn't really take you off path. It doesn't like mess with your DNA. But if it's a 3-person team, you add in that 4th person,
it sets you back, actually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it also, the opposite also has the effect too. I mean, there's systems and processes and work, like all that kind of stuff too, that kind of goes into it. But yeah, like the smaller the team, like the more important it is to get it right. And I feel like you guys have done that. Like, there's just it's interesting. I'm sure like it'd be fun to just have the behind the scenes conversation too, but it does feel like there's that, that consistency and just, it'd be fun to watch you guys over the next year.
Yeah. And it's so true because we were, what's the best way to say this? We're just very intentional with who we hire and the profile of the person that we're trying to hire for.
Yep.
And it's an interesting situation to be in because, we're a Series A startup. We're not super well known yet. I think we're making a name for ourselves now.
Yep.
And it's difficult to recruit. It's hard, and especially in today's hiring market. So we found, I think of the 5 hires outside of Jason and I, 4 out of the 5 we've got from cold outbound. Trying to find specific people who I've been following on LinkedIn and seeing, what they've been up to and watching their work from afar. So we're looking for people who agree with our mindset and want to like kind of be a part of that tribe together. So it's pretty awesome when everybody truly believes in that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think knowing that they believe it before they get on an interview with you and tell you that, right, you can validate it because like recognizes like, it really does. And so like when you're, especially LinkedIn, that's what I love about LinkedIn, honestly, is just the ability to see that regardless of, even having having a deeper connection or whatever. So
and it's kind of funny because, and I'm sure this is how it will be maybe for the rest of the time, but like we didn't even ask for resumes from people. Like I just saw their work product and I saw what they were doing on LinkedIn and conversations were had. And, if you would have told me, 5 years ago that I would hire somebody without even asking for the resume, I'd tell you that you're out of your mind.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, you got to like, you just know because you can see their work product and it's legit. Right. And so I think that it makes it's harder, I think, on the front end because you got to pre-qual just in the conversations, but then like everything else moves so much faster. And then, it also goes both ways too, right? So you're building a brand, right? Jason's building a brand, et cetera. And there's people, again, opposite is also true. Like recognizes like, and I think that's what's cool about it. So
no, it's something that we want to continue to build on too. So it's very important to us.
Yeah. So I should mention before I go any further, actually, we are actually a Metadata customer. And so this, by the way, is not necessarily like a promo or anything, but it's really more me just saying, look, legitimately speaking, the product is better than I have seen in my, 20 plus years of doing this. And I've been around, I've worked a lot of different companies. I just the thing is the way that it's not just the quality of the data and the targeting and everything else, but it's also the fact that we're able to just very easily go in. It's not very frou-frou like bells and whistles. It's very slick and streamlined.
It doesn't look great, but we're working on that too. But it works more than anything else.
I was going to say, that's what I love about it though, right? I mean, and like and obviously like everything else, like the devil's in the details. It's the stuff you don't see that's under the hood, right? And ultimately it's what ends up happening on the other side, and I, behind the scenes, you and I have talked about like sort of performance and stuff. And yeah, it's pretty fun. So I guess that maybe segues, right? Because I'm kind of talking from my own need, right? So we could be talking about like, hey, how do I use metadata better, in this podcast? And it could be the same exact, recording. But I guess my thing is there's a fundamental thing where, like we talk about, like everybody talks about MarTech and everybody talks about too many tools. And we talk about like, there's way too much noise. Obviously that's what we do. Like we're marketing automation and a CRM. But my thing is like, as I start out talking with anybody who's considering, like using something like our solution, is like, let's take a step back and try to figure out what you're trying to solve. Right. And Dave and I were just talking about this, 30 minutes ago or whatever, but it's really people like marketers, especially, I think, are prone to like all the bells and whistles and like throwing stuff against a wall and seeing if it sticks.
Shiny object syndrome too.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. But I think there's also like like an entropy factor that sort of happens, right? When everybody starts going down this path, and then you find out, well, you know what, that's not the thing, but here's the thing. And you go down this path. And that a lot of it gets solved by just really understanding the core need of what you're trying to, fix, right? Or build off of. There's two ways, right? You can fix something or you can build off of something. And I feel like for us, it wasn't really fixing something when we were thinking about you guys or considering something. It was really like building, right? We wanted to scale. We wanted to grow. And I feel like that's what a lot of folks think about, right? Is they're like evaluating something. So how do you sort of like, what's the inflection point that you see? This is my demand gen related question, right? Like, cause this is where my brain goes, but I always want to know, like, what's the thing behind the thing that causes somebody to say, I need that thing you've got because I think it might solve a pain point I've got. Like, what's typically the pain point that you see people coming in through?
Yeah. So I think there's the right pain point and there's the wrong pain point. And I'll tell you the wrong pain point first. The wrong pain point is when people think that I need tech and the tech is going to be my strategy for fixing whatever issue that they have, because Jason comes from an ops background. I come from an ops background. The only thing that the tech can do is enable the kind of the strategy and the process that you have in place already. It's not going to fix all of that. So the right pain point is when you have a strategy, you might not have enough people on your team and you're trying to maybe punch above your weight class a little bit, but you can then use metadata to execute your strategy at a scale that you would not be able to do with your current headcount or resources. We have a landing page that we just went live with some social proof from G. Cobain. And he said using metadata is like having 10 campaign managers on your team. So I'd say the best use case or the most painful pain point that we can alleviate is when you've got, the plan and you just don't have the bodies to execute the plan, and we can increase the capacity of your team.
Yeah, that's cool. And so let me come at it from the other direction, which is, what do you tell somebody where they're trying to solve the wrong problem? Like obviously you guys are trying to sell something, right? So there's but so like, what do you say?
So it's funny because what I'm going to share as my answer probably will surprise you, and it surprised me when I first joined. The sales team that we have here is the most honest and transparent sales team that I have ever worked with. We will actually turn people away if we think that they're not ready for metadata or they're not spending enough, because if they're going to spend very minimal amounts on paid social, they're not going to see value out of it at the end of the day. So if they're going to churn, a year from now, that doesn't do us good. That doesn't do them any good. So they have the open and honest conversations and letting people know when we think they're ready and when they're not ready, which is a kind of a breath of fresh air, I'd say, in SaaS.
Yeah. I love that, by the way, because it's sort of how we try to approach it. I'm not going to say we do it like 100% right all the time. I think sales is always like, they're always going to be on quota. They're always, trying to hit a number, but you have to give them a reason why it's better, right, to push somebody to some like a different solution or something else. And one of the things that we found really valuable is like, hey, look, resist resist the sales urge, right, to ask for like what's the next steps, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
But really, like, come at it completely different from the first minute. It's okay. You're, again, same exact question, right? That I posed to the sales team, which is, why are they coming to you in the first place? What is the problem they are trying to solve? And then let's just focus in on that, right? If we have a business outcome, right, that is, like solution oriented, where they're getting value in the conversation, they're going to ask. Right. They're going to qualify themselves. Right. And I mean, honestly, if I'm doing a fairly decent job as a marketer, I'm sending them the right kind of people anyway. But, I think it sounds so idealistic to somebody who is perhaps at a different company. Right. And they're facing the headwinds of sort of organizational mindset and the way we've always done it. How, like, obviously you went into an organization that was already set up that way, and so you're going with, but you've been in organizations like where that's not necessarily been the case. So that's my next question. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think what I've done in the past is, and it's interesting because I vetted that as I was interviewing at Metadata, because I wanted to make sure that the next company that I was going to be working for and, spending, a decent chunk of my career at, that was the situation that I was walking into. Yeah. So in the past, what I've done is I've tried to show examples of what good looks like, and not just from the, the external things that you can see out in the market, but from the sales process, sharing what a good sales process is like from my perspective with either my boss or the leadership team or whoever it may be. And assuming that you're working for reasonable people, when you show them what best in class looks like or what good looks like, they're always going to say, well, I want that. How do we get that? And then it kind of opens the door to have that conversation with them.
Yeah. And it takes a bit, right? Like it's not like a one pop type of thing. It takes
it's a lot of annoying. It's repetition. It's showing different examples. It's changing your pitch. Like it takes time.
Yep. What's interesting is this podcast started out, like, my mentality behind the podcast was to use it as a communication tool for our own folks, to talk through, like, what are the major challenges that we're facing, not in the market, right? Just in the market in general. Like, what is it facing? Like what do we want to be, as we sort of mature? And so I started that as, within SharpSpring, and then obviously we were required back in September, right? So we're what, 5 months into this thing now, and is that right? Yeah, something like that. And
it all blends together in a pandemic. Man.
Yeah. Believe me, the pandemic has nothing to do with it. It's just me trying to, hang on. But it's really more like, as I'm thinking through, like, we have two cultures, right? Or we did. Let me rephrase. Like, we had sort of two cultures. We had a constant contact culture. We had a SharpSpring culture, and they were not the same. And so we were trying to figure out, like, internally, like, how do we come up with a way to sort of be talking about marketing problems and solving problems that small businesses have. And, and the best way that I know of to do it is just have conversations like this, because it becomes real for people. And then so the podcast has sort of grown from that. It's kind of fun to just see, that. Plus I like it, I like having the conversations. So, but, yeah, no, I love the philosophy. And, for anybody who's out there that's listening in the audience that is like not in an organization that is like that, just know that there's hope, and that you do actually have the ability to change some things. It may not happen overnight, but there is sort of hope around that. So let me ask a different question. So, you sort of have an interesting audience, or that you're talking to there and it's not unlike, I think, the Sharp Spring audience in some ways, right? So these are these are folks that are SMBs, lower mid-market, let's call it, right, that are looking for ways to be able to grow their business. And we can talk about job titles and everything else, but in terms of like the problems that they are trying to solve, there are ways to be able to do that, right? There's ways to get the word out. Obviously, the last couple of years, the whole demand gen thing is really like demand. I'm going to put it in air quotes even. It's my title, but I'm going to put it in air quotes, because demand gen is really just good marketing, in my opinion. And, I've been probably doing this for 20.
I love where you're going with this, because I knew we get along. Keep going.
Yeah. So, I'm just kind of wondering, like, there's a lot of influencers that are out there on LinkedIn. They're talking. I'm kind of curious for you, like, what is the thing that you look at, right, when you're saying, like, this is the thing, this is what I want to talk about?
Yeah. So I think, I'm a big air quote person too. So I'll mention something about this in a sec. I think demand generation for the longest time was looked at as just running paid ads. Yep. And typically it fell on a single person's shoulders. And it's not. It's really the entire marketing team working and,
yep.
Doing all of that together. So I hate that, demand gen is owned by a single person. That's yep. completely false. Yep. Now, I would say for me, I would like, what we're trying to get out into the market is tough, because we're marketing to marketers at the end of the day. And I think with all of the bad MarTech that, we've all been burned by over the years, yeah. It makes it that much harder for us, because people have been burned so many times that they're, skeptical when you're trying to talk about, how metadata can make their life easier, when in reality, they've heard similar pitches that were empty promises, countless times. Yep. So for us, I think what we're trying to do, and you mentioned it earlier, is just being overly transparent, honest, authentic. It probably borders on the lines of raw and unpolished, because again, we're marketers. Everything's not perfect. It's chaos behind the scenes. We can't lie. And we just leave it all out there for everybody to see. And I think that's been working really well.
Yeah, no, that's, I think people need to hear that, because at the end of the day, the opportunity cost, right? I was talking to Pep the other day, where we were talking about like, he was on the show, and we were sort of talking through iterations of like how fast you can iterate and learn. And wait, I got to show my thing here. Wait, hang on. It'll pop back up. My camera's flipping out on me.
He's an awesome dude, by the way. I love his How to Win podcast.
Yeah, I do too. Doggone. Hang on. We'll edit this part out. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, he described it really like an iterative learning and testing sort of culture, as going from like this, concentric circle. Like, let's say this is the thing that you're trying to get done. Like, it's a campaign, or it's a launch, or it's a page, or whatever. You want to go from this to this. Mm-hmm. And I thought like that visual was really important, because there is a key like learning that you get. There's feedback. No page is going to be perfect. No campaign is going to be perfect. But if you can't learn in a shorter, more compressed period of time, you are never ever going to win. And you just, you're just burning time, and time is the only thing you don't have as a marketer. And so I feel like that's one of the things that I'm looking for, like when I like talk to guests, is like, what's the thing that you sort of like look at and you're like, okay, how do you bake that mentality into a team where you're thinking about growth and outcome instead of like getting it perfect, and I'm going to use like Pareto rule or like however you want to look
Yeah,
at
yeah,
it.
yeah.
How do you?
So it's interesting because that we're in a lucky position because it comes from the top down and it comes from Gil Alouche, our CEO. He, like, at the end of the day, using metadata helps you run campaign experimentation at scale. So experimentation really is in the DNA of the company, not just the product.
Yep.
And he encourages us, and not just encourages, but really requires us to experiment more than I've ever experimented before. And I think it made me a little uncomfortable at first because I was so used to maybe not shooting for perfection, but working on things for too long because they needed to be so polished before they got out into the market or wherever they were, being released. And once I got past that mindset of, if you get things out into market faster that aren't as polished, but still, MVP or good enough, by doing that, you can actually shorten like your learning cycle, and you can actually get to learnings faster and just rapidly improve things. So like, we're all about speed and experimentation and getting things out first and then updating and tweaking and perfecting over time. Whereas I've worked at companies before where, it would take forever to do similar things that we're doing here. Like Jason always uses this as an example. He ran marketing operations at Tableau. I forget how long, but he had like a marketing ops team of 70 or 75 people. And he had said when there were two of us, we were getting things done faster and iterating on them faster than a larger team like that. So it's a long-winded way of saying it's easy because it's in our DNA, but it comes from the top down.
Yeah. I heard, who did I hear say that? Oh, it was Dave Gerhardt said that the other day. He's like, yeah, like when we were at Drift and we only had like 3 people, we got so much more done than we did, as we were growing, because we were also dealing with like systems and processes and, controls and things like that, which you have to do as you scale. But you want to hold on to that for as long as you possibly can until you just can't. Right. And that always happens, but there's also success that comes with that, like otherwise, why are you doing it? But there's a bigger's not always better, in terms of team size. It's sort of the opposite. And anybody who's been doing it a while knows that, right? And those are the ones that you sort of want to hire. Those are the ones that you want to bring onto the team because they recognize that too. So I guess, okay. So we talk on this podcast a lot about sales pipeline and driving revenue, right? And so, for obvious reasons, right? I mean, that, like when I think about needing somebody needing like a CRM or somebody needing marketing automation, trying to make decisions in a silo is very bad, right? And dangerous all at the same time. And so what I think it lines up pretty well with what you guys do, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the same sort of thing, right? If you can't get a business outcome for a customer, then what ends up happening is they attrit or they go away or whatever. So how do you sort of measure or talk about, and then also like you're living it in a real life, right? That's your job, right? So that's just like I am. I'm living it in real life. So I guess here's my question: like in terms of like driving pipeline and revenue, how do you think about like the organization? Like when you bring in MQLs, when you hand those over the fence, like what's the philosophy behind that? And then what do you use to be able to make that work? And it's fine if you
Mhm.
use, if you're talking about a competitor or whatever, I don't care. I'm just
Mhm.
more like, how
Yeah,
do you
yeah, yeah.
think about it?
So I think the first thing is, and it goes back to mindset. And this was something that when I was interviewing with Jason, summer of 2020, it became very clear that he and I shared the same mindset. So we do not hand over anyone to the sales team unless they've requested a demo. So that's really the only thing that we care about as far as like leading indicators go. And obviously, we're measuring other stuff that we'll talk about
Amen.
here in a sec. But
Oh, wait,
yes,
did you hear that?
so
Like, amen. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
that goes a long way with your sales team too. So I think it's built on trust in that relationship. So we are looking at demos, we are looking at opportunities created, pipeline created, and really marketing attributed revenue. Now, you can't jump all the way to just measuring yourself on revenue. We, in full transparency, are not there yet. We are working towards that, and that is our North Star. But we started from kind of MQLs to jumping off that hamster wheel to then moving over to demos and meetings booked.
Yep.
And then now we're currently at opportunities created and pipeline created, and that's what we're goaled against. So
Awesome.
we measure all of that in Salesforce. We've got a great RevOps lead who's been a godsend for us in cleaning a lot of that stuff up.
Yeah.
But I think outside of what we measure, what really makes that happen is the operating rhythm that we are in with our sales team. And it starts at the top and it goes down to me and the other mid-level directors on the sales team. And it goes down to the reps and the other marketers. Like everyone is speaking the same language and we're all working towards the same goals. And Jason is very clear in front of the company that there should never be a time where marketing is celebrating whatever quarterly goals that they had when sales didn't hit their goal. So we are never celebrating like, hey, look at us, we did a great job, if the company goals and the sales goals aren't met. So it's mindset, and it's really just working closely with sales.
So I love that. We similarly, about 4 or 5 months ago, had the same sort of conversation. So I came into this role, and that was my number one thing, right? I knew the sales leader ahead of time anyway, but that was all that mattered to me. Otherwise, I knew it wasn't going to work. And so he and I sat in a room for hours on a day. It was like a Wednesday. And we got together and I said, look, this is my philosophy. And I don't know if this lines up with what you're thinking, but this is how I want to operate, right? I want to bring you people that come to the website of their own volition, raise their hand and say, I want a demo and I want to have a conversation. And you like his eyes lit up. He's like, I have been waiting for somebody to have this conversation for 3 years. And I mean, he's worked at different companies over the last 3 years too. It wasn't just,
Yeah.
And I said, that's all that, like, it's all that matters, right? At the end of the day, like, if they're not ready, like, you're just spinning your wheels. And you called it the hamster wheel. I like that too, right? I mean, that's exactly what it feels like. You're just keep running.
We've all been on it before too. Yeah.
Yeah, you exhaust yourself. The whole bit happens. But we had to change some things because we're actually a customer of our own product, like you guys probably are, right? So
Yep.
we're using this product, our SharpSpring, to figure out how to solve our own problems. And one of the things that we did pretty much right out of the gate was said, look, if we really believe in this philosophy, we got to stop routing leads the way we've been routing them through. And I had this graphic that I showed the execs, and I said, look, like right now it's like Plinko. You ever seen Plinko?
Yep.
It's like Plinko, right? You got leads and they just kind of like trickle through, and then you don't know where, like, something happens at the bottom and it lands on an AE's calendar. And the actual buyer has been knocked around so many different times and rerouted and have different, it's just a
Yep.
really bad experience all the way around. And I just, the way I sold it sort of internally is I just said, hey, look, how do you like to buy? Right. And I was talking to the execs at the time. I was like, hey, how do you like to buy? Like, obviously, like, what do you do? Right. And we go through that process. Right. So we rewired everything in SharpSpring to route everybody directly. Anybody who's is what I call our high intent funnel, right, is coming through, they're raising their hand and they go right into an AE, book a calendar with Acuity, or Calendly or whatever. And then, we have what I call a low intent team, and which is exactly what you think it is. Right. And we still have that motion that happens. And my job is to, at the end of the day, it's probably more than demand. It's very holistic. It's really sort of growth related, where I'm looking at, like, where are the opportunities, what are the numbers we need to hit, and then that's across multiple teams. And we grew as a company back in the day from zero, just like a lot of companies do, which at least then, with an outbound sort of motion. And so, we got to, we were a publicly traded company at the time, so these are all public numbers, but, we got to $30 million or so in ARR, and we were growing at a good clip. But we got to that off the back of a really strong outbound program. And then, here I come along and I'm like, no. Right? That's not going to work. Right? We need to do something a little bit differently. And I'm being just completely, like, transparent here. That conversation was difficult without, let me rephrase, would have been very difficult without a really good executive team that understood what the problem was, right? Which means everything. It didn't mean it solved everything, but they understood, like, they're really, like, proactive and good about it. But then the other thing was, I came to the table with, I didn't have 75 slides. Like, I came to the table with, okay, here's the goal. Let's work our way backwards from the goal. Right. And then let's figure out how this leads up. And so this is my next question to you. Mm-hmm. How do you go and switch what I'm going to call seamlessly and still hit the growth goals that you need, coming off of the hamster wheel MQL drug, weaning yourself off of that, and still seeing yourself in a position where numbers don't fall off, but the kind of high intent hand raisers are picking up. Like, you gotta come off that and bring this up at the same time. Like, so how do you balance that? And that's my question.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even say $1 million question. That's like the $10 million question that I think a lot of people are wondering right now. So I think
perhaps higher, but
probably higher. So I'll speak to my own experience at Metadata. So we have and it's not really a plug because I think it's helpful at the end of the day, but we came out with what we call demand planning template, and it looks at a whole bunch of different inputs to figure out, hey, if you need to generate, X amount in revenue, X amount of pipeline, X amount of meetings, ops, MQLs, you name it, you can kind of back into what your goals are. Yep. And I think when we were moving off of MQLs and we had that, when sales saw that was what we were using to kind of frame up our argument, they were thinking to themselves, wow, I haven't worked with a marketing team who's done this before. And two, I can really see that they are speaking our language. So it helped us that we had, quantifiable targets that we knew that we were going to hit if we weren't going to mention or measure MQLs. Yeah. But what we also had to do was we had to figure out really creatively, how can you hit those high intent numbers? And for us, you probably got one of these. I know most of the B2B marketers out there have. We were using LinkedIn conversation ads with an incentive for people to take a meeting with us. Yeah. And it worked for a long time, and it worked for a couple of different reasons. But I think the biggest thing for us was it was getting meetings with the right type of person and the right profile of company for our sales team. And whether or not they were ready to buy, it was a great intro call, and they were the right like the right types of conversations that our sales team wanted to have.
Mm-hmm.
And that like helped us hit the short-term number and kind of back off of MQL. So again, it didn't happen in a quarter. It probably took 3 or 4 quarters. It was gradual. But once you can prove that you're capable of hitting those high intent numbers, then you earn yourself a little bit more trust and opportunity to, focus more on the brand side of things.
Yeah. So LinkedIn conversation ads, like just for the audience, like walk through that really quickly. Like, what is that?
Yep.
How does it work? How do you count it? How do you measure
it?
Yeah.
So I would say the easiest way to explain it is imagine a Drift-like chat experience directly in your LinkedIn inbox, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure. And the one kind of cheat code that most people don't realize is once you've been on the receiving end of one of those, you actually can't get another one from anyone else for 30 days. So you kind of control the person's conversation ad in their inbox for 30 days.
Yep.
And what we were doing was we'd say, hey, based on what we know about you, and we were using some pretty awesome data from our own platform and other creative ways to find, to get so laser focused that we knew it was the right person and the right fit. So what we would do is we would offer up a $100 gift card for DoorDash or Amazon, whatever it may be, if they took a meeting with us and if they could confirm that they were spending at least $20K a month on paid social. So if they checked those 2 boxes, they could then schedule time with us right away and have a good intro call for us. I think when we were growing as a company and really as a sales team, it was awesome just to get that many at bats for our sales team as they were figuring out how to sell this, what messaging is working, what's not working. And we've been gradually waning off of that, as we've grown the size of the team and just as a company, and it's been working.
So I don't, and by the way, I can edit this out if you need to or whatever later, but like, can you give a ballpark of like what you were actually seeing in terms of quantity or even like what was the actual conversion to like a LinkedIn ad to or conversation ad to an actual conversation?
Yeah. So I would say the LinkedIn conversation ad conversion to meeting was probably in the 60 to 70% range, like conversion rate. Now from that to
that's with the $100, right? That's with the $100 incentive.
With the $100. Yep.
Okay.
And then from that to an opportunity, we were probably at, I would say 20%. And then from that to close one revenue, we were about 5%. So the big learning for us, and this isn't going to surprise you when I share this, any high intent demo request that came through the website or another paid channel without any incentive converted 5x of that. So we knew that it was not going to convert nearly as high as, let's just say organic or non-incentivized channels. But the volume that was working for us that we were able to, we were generating, 200-300 qualified demos a month by way of that. And again, maybe the timing wasn't right for that particular person or company, but it was the exact title and person we wanted to get in front of. And sure enough, 6 months, 12 months later, we've had some of those people come back and be like, hey, I'm ready for this now. I'd love to talk. So we looked at it positively.
Well, and also I think you have to have the kind of sales approach that you have as an organization in order to make something like that work. Otherwise you're going to burn too many bridges. And
exactly.
It totally makes sense. So like you got to have both things go together. Yeah, that's cool. So, okay, very quickly, like one of the things that, we have been doing is original research. So we work with, various firms like, Gartner or Ascend2 or, these various different places. And, we're like, it's funny, I'm doing it for selfish purposes. Like, it's not just to churn out content. It's actually because I genuinely want to know like more about my own ICP, dial that in better. And then we just actually turn that around and actually chop it up and turn it into content or whatever. But so we did one in, I don't know, I think it was like October or something, like fourth quarter. And there's a question in there that said, 83% of marketers agree that consolidating tools in their marketing and sales sort of stack, right, increases productivity and efficiency. And my question is that true for you, right? Just in your own use case within your own organization with, a fairly like a strong like demand gen mentality combined with a sales team. Like, does that resonate with you, or like, tell me what you're thinking?
Like trying to consolidate technology and like the how many
Yeah,
tools you
like
were in, or I guess in what sense?
philosophy. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think it's a great question because the philosophy when I worked with the research firm to think through what the question, like what I was trying to get out
Hmm.
of it was, there are so many marketers who go into a new gig, right, leader of, and
Hmm.
they inherit so much of the tech stack slash debt, right, that the predecessor had.
Yep.
And it's just, they're in a new situation, they're in a new job, they're trying to hit their number, and then they're being in a lot of ways hampered by the existing stack, because let's face it, like, that's just not, like, we just don't do a good job of that as marketers. We're not really good operational people by
Yeah.
nature, right? And so, the framing of the question was to say, okay, look, if you are in either in a new job or you're just in your job and you're trying to hit your number, like,
Hmm.
is the consolidation of those tools, does that make your life better? Or no, it doesn't matter. Or is it, nah,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
think I think it matters, but it's not something that I try to. That's not the first fight that I recommend fighting when you come into a new role. I think and I'll speak to my last company. Um, my previous boss, let's just say he was a big fan of shiny technology
Yeah.
objects as a marketer, and to each their own. That's not my perspective.
Right.
What I looked at first was basically the book a demo process, and I audited the entire process, and I was trying to find, where are there holes in this process, where is there friction, where is there just unnecessary steps, like you name it.
Yeah.
And I started there first. It probably took, I'd say, a good 2-3 months to figure out what exactly was happening and where and why, and to make recommendations.
Mhm.
But I try to fix processes first, as opposed to just going in and saying, all right,
Yep.
let's swap out, the ABM platform that I don't like using and bring in metadata. It's like, you can do that. I just don't think it's the wisest first move to make when you're taking on a new role.
You need the base hit credibility building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially like when you're looking at that, let's just say book a demo process,
Yeah.
that then involves the sales team. And when you're doing something that helps make their lives easier at the end of the day, you're building trust and a relationship with them, instead of just saying, hey, marketing is going to go blow, 40, 50K on some new cool tool that they're not really sure if it's going to work or not.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's the challenge. Is there are times when that works, right? Where you're saying, like, I literally am having a hard time getting my job done to hit the number. And there has to be a low lift, high return if you're going to do it early. And then and I would still recommend, like, getting a couple of base hits under your belt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're hitting your numbers first and then thinking through it. And then there's also, like, to me, like, when I think about, like, folks that come to us, it's like they're struggling with their data. They are struggling with, like, I've got, a suite of tools, right? I'm not going to name names, but I've got a suite of tools, and I'm trying to make all of these things work. And then ultimately I'm trying to make sense of the data in each one of these tools that probably weren't really necessarily meant to work together. And so what ends up happening is, over time, you spend half, like, you got a marketing ops person who's always, half his job is just pulling reports all day and, like, getting
Been there.
Yeah. And so, like, I think there is a case for it. The question becomes, like, when do you do it? And I liked your answer, and it's actually the advice I sort of give, which is get a couple of base hits under your belt, right? Get that credibility, get the trust in the ear of the decision makers, Make
Mhm.
sure that you're not leaning on that, because they've already been burned by that 3 times in the past, right? They already, like, they may not say it, but they have been, and they're watching.
Oh yeah.
And so this is that next step, is to make sure that you don't like lean on that as a crutch, right? Like, honestly, you just need to go in and figure out how your buyers are buying, right?
Yeah.
Figure out, map out that process. I used a lucid chart. That's how I did it. Like, I came in,
That's what I do too. Yep.
yeah. And I was like, okay, here's how everything works: high intent, low intent, the whole bit. And really kind of gave me, it was as much for my own use, like my own calibration, than it was anything else, because I would have it there. I would look at, what are the conversion rates, right, by channel, like, by, input, or whatever you want to call it on the site, and then figure out, okay, now where do I direct my effort, right? And like that didn't require a whole bunch of things. It just required me thinking about how my customers are coming in and turning into customers. So anyway, yeah, I think
It sounds like it sounds so obvious that you would do that right out of the gate, but most people do not do that. And I think it helps out in so many different ways when you try to understand your audience right when you get a new gig, and it's this crazy new concept. It's not, but you, like, all I did when I first started was I was listening to call recordings. I was jumping on calls with the sales team. I was soaking up as much as I could. And it was probably the first time where I actually did that when I started. I'd always wanted to do that, and found a million other excuses as to why I couldn't. And I think that gave me a leg up. And I look back on it very, very positively.
And use your own product.
Yeah.
Be the person, be the marketer that goes into their own product and knows the product, right? Use your own product, right?
Yep.
That's my other piece of advice too, is just get in there and just be really comfortable talking about what the product is. And so I would say this, and there's always sort of like, I try to make this podcast like encouraging too, because it's like one of those things where it's never too late. Like, I don't care if you've been in the job for 2 years. It's never, like, you can still hop on and start listening to customer conversations. You can still start looking at support tickets and seeing what's going on and the feedback. You could still be going in and having those conversations with sales, right? You could still be in your own product and learning it and figuring it out, right? But we do, and this isn't a marketer thing, this is a human nature thing. We want to fill our time up with other things that are not necessarily the most important things, and that's what happens, so like calendars, like it's a human nature thing. So I think the advice that you're given, like, I think everybody should probably be like slice that up and like record it. So
yeah, the other cheat code that I have, and I didn't get this, I didn't invent this, but I've been trying to get much better about just calendar management. And we've been doing no meeting Wednesdays, which has been absolutely amazing. And then I block off 4 hours of my day every day that people can't schedule meetings over, because it's impossible to get into a rhythm when it's 30 minutes here, 45 minutes there, meeting, and you can't actually get the important work done.
That's totally right. Yeah, totally right. And yeah, it's hard too, especially like when you're like trying to figure out, if you're like me, you want to be available, right? You want to be available for your teammates. You want to be available to provide feedback. You want to be, I have somebody who says, that you want to be a good corporate citizen, right? You want to be that. The challenge with that is you sometimes miss the forest for the trees, right? When you try to do that, right? You're not really doing the thing that you need to be doing, which is, the value add that you were brought in for to begin with. And it's hard. It's really hard. So, yeah, no, I love that. So, hey, like, how do people get a hold of you? Like, how do they, like, anybody who's listening, like, hey, this guy, like, they've got some interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. Connect with me on LinkedIn. We've got a whole lot going on right now, so if I'm a little slow to respond, it's not because I don't want to. And then you'll see me in DGMG quite a bit, lurking around and answering questions and whatnot. So yeah, I like to make myself accessible just because marketing to marketers at the end of the day, and I try to make as much time as I can for them.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.